Hello, and you are listening to Bill Murphy's Red Zone podcast. If you are listening for the first time, I interview leaders who inspire me in the areas of hardcore IT security, IT business leadership, innovation, creativity, entrepreneurship, and fearless living principles. Welcome to the show. Hello and welcome to episode 38 of the Red Zone podcast. If you're new to the show, my goal and passion is to interview and bring to you the best leaders in hardcore IT security, business innovation, creativity, entrepreneurship, and fearless living principles. I'm your host, Bill Murphy, and in today's show, I'm thrilled to bring to you my interview with Eric Vanderburg, a thought leader and director of information systems and security at JurInnov, a cybersecurity and forensics company that helps businesses get back on their feet following a data breach. Today's episode is brought to you by CIO Security Scoreboard. Go to visualcio.com to learn more about how to communicate the status of your IT security program visually in minutes. Again, the address to learn more about the CIO Security Scoreboard is visualcio.com. Well, Eric, I want to welcome you to the show today.
Thanks. Pleasure to be here.
So you are prolific all over the internet with a lot of your research and thought leadership. And I am really kind of interested on, I've seen you mentioned as being called the Sherriff of the internet. And how did you get this name? And what does it mean to you being the Sherriff of the internet?
Well, I've certainly heard that the term is definitely not official. It was just given to me, I think, in an interview sort of like this, where the person I was talking to was like, wow, you're like the sheriff of the internet. And they put that out. And then somebody else picked it up when they were doing a bio on me. And it appeared and it's kind of stuck. But I've also heard other people say, wait, okay, I think the sheriff of the internet is Microsoft or is, Symantec or, Intel, one of those. Okay, I mean, I'm not saying I'm the only sheriff of the internet or anything like that. I think it was pretty cool that they gave me that title. That's nice. But I'm doing my best to try to protect companies and individuals from all the threats that are out there.
Well, absolutely.
And that's what you can do.
Well, that's good. It's always interesting how people kind of inherit the space in people's minds. And so I think that's an interesting one, Sheriff of the Internet. I love that. Obviously, your area is quite wide. And I want to pick a couple areas let's have some fun first with talking about Microsoft Hololens, because I saw your post recently on this, and maybe you can explain a little bit about Hololens from your point of view and what you think is possible with this augmented reality device that Microsoft is promoting.
Sure. If you take a step back, Google Glass was probably the biggest entrance into this on augmented reality, giving you information about the world around you and kind of integrating that into your everyday life. And then we had a variety of different goggles that are out there now to either add onto your smartphone or to be able to use with computers. The HoloLens is more like the Google Glass in that it's something you can wear and it's not directly tied to another computing device for its support. And it projects images before your eyes, but as if they were out on the landscape around you, so that you can interact with virtual objects in a similar manner as you would with the physical objects around you. So you reach out and you grab a glass that's on the table. Well, there could be a virtual representation that's shown through the HoloLens of an object that you want to work on. And now as you manipulate it with your hands, HoloLens's cameras are picking up those actions and are able to perform those computational actions on your behalf and then give you the feedback on how that modified the virtual object.
So I see you had signed up for, I guess it was, maybe you can explain, you were doing something with clothing, or there was some contest that Microsoft had that wanted ideas. And maybe you could explain what your idea was a use for the HoloLens.
Sure. So the biggest problem with a lot of these technologies that come out is, are there actual uses for them? You got a great technology, mean, the Kinect suffered from this as well. Another technology from Microsoft, using all these cameras, they decided to port it to the PC and said, "Oh, we got a Kinect for PC," but nobody developed apps for it. I say nobody. There wasn't that critical mass that can take a product to a successful position. And so, of course, they don't want to repeat that with the HoloLens, especially after all the advertising that they did along with Windows 10. So they're looking for ideas from everyday users, from companies, on how they might utilize this in real-world applications. And there were probably 100 ideas in my mind that morning, but you can submit one. So I decided to choose one that I thought would be less mainstream than what I typically write about. So I wrote about fashion. And I thought it'd be kind of nice if you had the HoloLens on, you go to a product website, want to take a look at a dress, or you want to take a look at a new suit, you click on that one, load it up in your HoloLens, and try it on your actual body. So there you're wearing the suit. You're able to see how it fits. Check sizing. Oh, well, maybe I don't want the 42 long. Let me try the 44. Boom. You're trying the 44. You button that thing up. You can turn around, look in the mirror. Maybe you want to try it on a mannequin of your body. I said, well, you can clone yourself and put the clothes on that mannequin or avatar and now walk around it, take a look at it. But the second part of shopping is that people will bring their friends. You go on into the store, you try on something, and you walk out and see what your friends say, right? Well, you can't do that in the virtual world. Not yet, at least. Here, you could try on the outfit, and then I suggested, well, share it with friends and see what they think. Now you get the feedback, and you go buy it online. Takes that online experience and makes it more like the experience in the physical world.
That's a great idea, sharing with friends. I think that's what a great way to get feedback right away from that. They're trying on that virtual suit, for example, or the virtual tie.
Right, the virtual suit tie. I mean, even if you were in your own wardrobe, I could see people doing it in the morning, like, oh boy, important meeting. Or, you imagine the college students, like, interview today, and they try on that thing and they post it up. And somebody says, you cannot wear that tie with that gray suit. Thank you very much.
Or it could be like my son, and he's going out with his tie to his school this morning, and I'm like, well, you got to kind of button that shirt up at the top there.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing too, on that Microsoft video was the other ways of usage. Just for example, like fixing and repairing plumbing around the house, or fixing and repairing something that you would maybe touch once every 10 years, and being able to work with a service repair technician and have them be able to draw on this kind of a virtual lens where you'd fix certain components. I thought that was an interesting application to it as well.
Exactly. Well, and you could see it in revolutionizing the video conferencing industry too. Instead of us just seeing each other's little pictures on a screen, we could take a whole holographic image of a person and present it in your holo view, and we can interact more on a personal level. You could have that serviceman who's essentially coming home for Christmas.
Oh, I like that idea a lot. So you're saying the video conferencing where you could actually project the image of the remote presenter into the meeting room. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Or you're in a foreign country and you want to come back and be with your family. You sit around a table, they sit around a table. You see them around your table, even though they're not there. They see you around the table, but you all can talk.
Yeah. What a great idea. That's great. So you sat down. I wasn't expecting to go down this path, but what's interesting is that you had 100 ideas, or at least just submit here. How did you come up with the 100 ideas to begin with? And then how do you generate ideas? Do you go through a process of generating ideas generally on a day-to-day basis, or is this something that was just unique for this effort?
Oh, I think I've always kind of been a bit passionate about. It started off with artificial intelligence and virtual reality. That would probably have been my passion, even decades ago, because at that point, augmented reality wasn't even something that I had considered. It never entered my mind. So some of these ideas probably were in the formative stage in those years, and I just imagined us doing that in a fully virtual world. Well, augmented reality is like semi-virtual world. We're taking virtual elements and impressing them upon the physical world. In some ways, I think it's much better than virtual reality, because virtual reality is cutting you off from the real world, which is our true connection with one another, and whereas augmented reality is allowing the two to coexist. There's
a differentiation between augmented reality, which is really participating in virtual and 3D at the same time. You're actually adding that fourth dimension, so it's adding the third and the fourth dimension together. in a practical way, is what you're saying is augmented reality.
Right.
I love that distinction because that essentially you're applying very practical uses in day-to-day with this new way of essentially bridging geography.
Exactly. I mean, I see that as the biggest thing. If you're close by, you just go and visit somebody in the real world. I mean, I prefer that at least. But if you're far away, you don't have that option. And so we've developed all these different technologies to allow us to communicate more effectively. I mean, we move from mail to email, from texting to messaging through all these different social networks, and now to video conferencing and beyond. Each one is connecting us all around the world, allowing us to share ideas faster and to come up with more innovations and to connect more personally. In some ways, it does the opposite, and it it allows us to connect on such a grand scale that we aren't able to foster those real relationships. And that's where you strike the balance with any of these technologies, where augmented reality does have an advantage over virtual reality, in that you still have a physical presence. You're still grounded in the physical world.
You obviously had a passion about this for years, and so I'm coming at it from a less of an educated point of view on this. But I'm curious: is this augmented virtual designation? Is this something that's well defined in the industry, or is it something it's your personal lens and perspective on the situation?
Well, the term augmented reality and virtual reality are industry-defined terms, but both are still new technologies per se, even though virtual reality has been talked about for a long time in science fiction, and we've been able to explore more of the scenarios and these thought process on it for a long time. But
that's excellent.
I take my own viewpoint on it.
Okay. So you had these ideas for a while, but I in looking at your writing and looking at the way you generate ideas, and you have on SlideShare a couple hundred presentations, and I know your role is as a thought leader, but as a thought leader, how do you plug into ideas, in not just with the virtual reality and augmented reality, but outside of that, in the security space? How are you formulating your own ideas and approaches? Is there a process that you go through as a thought leader to bring concepts and such, and bring these ideas to the market?
Sure. First, you have to have knowledge or data to begin with. So I have trusted sites and blogs and all kinds of other things that I rely on to give me current information. Then, of course, I synthesize that internally. I think about it, process it, but this doesn't come from me. I try to engage with other thought leaders and other people in the industry, with my own customers, and have these discussions. That's probably one of the advantages of being a consultant. I get to talk to businesses every day about problems they have and solutions. And that allows some of those ideas to further take a form. And then at some point, when they mature in my mind, I write about them and try to disseminate and share that knowledge with others.
Yeah, and I think there's quite a lot of consultants in the world, but I find that your ability to do that is sort of at a world-class level. And so what are some examples of, like, what are the top 2 or 3 trusted sites that you like to leverage for security information, for example, trusted security information?
There are quite a few, but I mean, I like dark reading, find a ton of great articles there. But then I also love reading articles on Forbes. I get very different articles, but both of them can be equally inspiring for new ideas.
I would agree. I really like the content of Forbes. The writers are very good. Now, as far as synthesizing it, will you take time? Do you build time into your schedule to think, Eric? Like, literally, do you build writing time into your schedule, or do you just kind of wait for that burst of inspiration while you're flying on a plane?
Yeah, that is one of the most difficult parts, and it ends up being late in the evening. It's a weird schedule. I can't recommend it to everybody. I go through a regular work day. I come home, spend time with my family. The kids go to bed, spend some time with my wife, and then it's usually time to start thinking about things, writing, putting those ideas down on paper. There's all these draft documents that just have ideas. Now, of course, I keep my phone next to me. I have my notes application, and I'll just dictate to it. I may be driving or something like that. Suddenly, an idea pops into my head. I lose ideas real fast. So I just pull that thing out and I just say, whatever. I just speak it in there, enter, and then put the phone back down. Okay, ideas captured. And at some later point, I'll pull all those ideas out and kind of reflect on them again. Some I build and develop further. Other ones kind of just, they never really end up in the trash bin, but they're just not acted upon.
Well, I think it's important though that you have a discipline around it, and I often talk to CIOs and CISOs about this, and they are thought leaders within their own organization, and I often suggest that they should publish and they should write and distill information, either put it on LinkedIn or just have an opinion, start to really write opinions and down and thoughts. And I always am curious about people's processes that do that quite well, and even though it might seem sort of hacked together, even your process of late in the evening and capturing notes and having a tool to capture notes, you're making it important to your brain so that your brain knows that when it feeds you a clever insight, it's going to be taken seriously.
Yeah, I mean, you got to understand yourself and how you work too. Each person's going to be a little different. Some people are able to think of an idea and it could sit there in their subconscious and they'll be able to recall it whenever. For me, ideas are coming through, and if I don't capture them, rein them in, they're gone. So I have to have that way of grabbing them.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that, because I just interviewed David Cross, who's got 21 patents, and he's the top guy at Microsoft Azure platform for security, the top security guy at Microsoft Azure. And I asked him that question, and it was fascinating, his process he goes through for generating ideas for these patents that over the years. And he's made it important. He doesn't have a specific time of the day he always does it, but when his brain serves up that idea, it gets captured.
I do want to integrate it into my day more, and there was a technology that was announced a couple of years ago and got my hopes up. Now has changed direction slightly, was the Muse. In their initial announcement, they had described how it would be able to detect some of your brain waves. You'd wear this device, and it could tell you things about your emotional state, your attentiveness. And I thought, well, that would be a great device. I thought I'd buy it for work, buy a couple of them. And I'd wear it around for a week and document throughout the day what I was doing. I had my calendar, but then, a few other things in addition. And then use the data from that to determine, am I optimizing my day correctly? If I'm most creative, during this period here, am I doing creative things during that period? Or am I not using my mind during that time? Or are there other periods where I'm not very functional, and that's where I want to schedule those more mundane, automated type tasks? But by the time they release the product, you needed to be stationary for the product to get effective readings on your brain. And about the only thing they had for it was the concentration portion. They didn't have some of these other emotional intelligence type components. But I'm eager for somebody to release a device that I would be able to wear throughout the day. And my idea was that I'd wear it, I'd do that just be for myself, but then make it available to others. Say, I'm not going to collect your data or anything like that. Just make this available to you so you can better optimize your day. Maybe you find out that, oh boy, I'm stuck in this. I come in at 7 and I leave at 4 or 5 or something like that, and I'm most productive 9 to 6. Oh, well, let's do that.
No, you're absolutely right, and you share a similar interest of mine. Is I think we're, and it's funny if that particular Muse device, if it could kind of understand the syncing of the brain, almost like an MRI of the brain, because now we know when the left brain's firing versus the right, and if we're trying to synthesize information, what you were just talking earlier, so you're taking essentially a lot of left brain activity from kind of the research angle, and then you're trying to bring in the creative angle. It's like, when is the brain best ready for that? Is it early in the morning before the kids wake up? Is it late at night? Because the brain would probably have to be more settled and less optimized for kind of operations functions during the day, like at work, or when you're triggered in a meeting because someone fires you up.
Right.
It's probably better on other times of the day, but it would be good to kind of measure that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I think the brain can be trained to some respect too. Once you get the data and understand how you need to train it. Right now, we're operating without that data. It's just too expensive to be able to gain it, even if we could. But I'm hoping that this type of technology can come into the masses so that we can start acting on that. It's all about, you got to have the data first, right?
Right. And I think there is a company called HeartMath that I think is getting close, like literally the word heart and math, MATH. They have measuring tools that really leverage a lot of the heart functions, which not purely the brain, but I guess they're finding out there's a good chunk of our brain that's in our stomach actually too. So it's all kind of works together. So it's interesting, but we'll have to keep looking for the Muse HeartMath type, what are they, personalized devices in the future.
Yeah, somebody's going to combine it all together. It's going to be great. And of course, there's going to be all the negative parts of it too. If you connect it into the internet and somebody starts grabbing data on your brain, whoa, right?
Yeah, I mean that's a huge piece. Is right. More of that personalized information becomes public, then it becomes a little bit easier to you get more exposed for takedown activity for a bad guy for sure.
We start talking about there's technologies allow you to control in-game characters. And so far, the applications have been still rather rudimentary. You would think, okay, if I have brain control, I'll be much more responsive. Not necessarily. There's this whole your subconscious can make some decisions on your behalf, whereas these other technologies rely on the conscious, and so you lose some of that, almost like the hand-eye coordination and like trained response that we built into our bodies. You lose some of that because it requires the higher level thinking, but also that we just haven't been able to capture enough data to be able to do some of the complex movements. But once you get all those things in and you have this communication, what's preventing it then from having bidirectional communication? And at that point, we get to the possibility of either companies embedding things into their software that are now sort of reprogramming your brain, or malware infecting software to reprogram your brain, to hack your brain.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just over the past 5 years alone, we've learned more in the neuroscience realm than the previous 20 years combined. So it's just medical science. I think there's a Moore's law within. Moore's law is what every year and a half technology speeds and prices are cut in half. Technology speeds are increasing, but in the medical device, in the medical arena, it's 400% improvement every single year.
That's amazing.
It's mind-boggling. So let's talk a little bit about. I have a couple questions about your experience as an expert witness and your role within the legal community. And I'd like to kind of start it off with corporate espionage and maybe explain how a hack of intercompany espionage works and kind of your experience of how a legal process would work. And maybe we could just start there at that and kind of dive into that a little bit.
Okay. So, first off, does it happen? Yes, it does. And we've worked on cases involving corporate espionage. I won't be able to speak to specifics, but we could talk about, some things without mentioning, the actors and entities. Sure. So, a lot of times, third parties involved, potential deniability, and they just don't want it tracked back to their premises. And the fact that these services are widely prevalent. You can buy hacks, you can buy botnet resources, and all these things out on the dark web if you know where to look. Frankly, this is a funny statistic, or not a statistic, but data point. When I was at Dell World, the other month, I was talking to an administrator for a number of college networks. And he said, well, years ago, when somebody didn't study for a test, what would they do? They'd go on in and they'd pull the fire alarm. And, okay, the class is canceled, right? These days, they go online and they hire out a distributed denial of service stack on the university. First few times that worked, now they've gotten smart to it and they have defenses in place to get rid of all that overflow traffic. But it's funny. It's so accessible. They don't have to have computer specialized knowledge to be able to do it. They just need to know where to go and have a credit card, or right. Bitcoins or something. So, that level of prevalence of this technology and these services means that it's a lot easier for companies to engage in the espionage or, just taking down services of their competitors. It just takes some money and motivation and partially flawed morality. So
just to clarify, you're actually seeing just inter-US corporate espionage cases in which there's actually they're trying to take down their competitors or find information about competitors.
Yes, we are seeing that. Actually, there was one on the news just recently, about was it a dry cleaning company that had been hacking another dry cleaning company to obtain their customer list.
So to get their customer list. So from a corporate espionage point of view, I guess there's two angles to look at that. One is from the China and overseas to steal intellectual property, but then there's just the can we steal their list? Can we deny services to their sites? Can we otherwise bring on business disruption for them? Is that the primary motives usually that you see?
Yes, I mean, countries go through their own maturity level. If you look at even the United States, when we were an early country, we adopted technologies without going through the licensing process, from Great Britain. And other European nations, very much took them wholesale and brought them over here and used them. Now with the internet, it's even easier. We find that less developed countries that don't have the laws and protections in place for that intellectual property don't feel the
impetus.
The
motivation.
They feel the motivation to go and get that data and just start using it. And so then as a country develops more of its own IP, they start enacting laws to protect that IP. And once you have your own thing to protect, you're less likely to start taking another person's because you're actually able to sympathize and understand. So they go through their own maturity. So we see from those countries a lot more attacks trying to take the intellectual property. Now from others, where there's those patent laws and things in place, they know they might end in a legal battle if the source of the data came into question. So there's other types of attacks, those that are more geared towards taking things like a customer list or pricing sheets or information on employees that they may want to poach or on taking down critical services at key times.
You're the first person I heard that analogy made, though, from like the 1700s, early 1800s, when we were a brand new country. We actually stole technologies from Europe and in England and brought them to the U.S. without license. So that's actually the first time I've heard that. That's a very logical, and I didn't really think about it from that angle.
Well, I like history too, but we're taking all these cotton machines and other manufacturing type machines and bringing them over here.
Right, because that whole manufacturing base built in the Northeast, where I grew up. Yeah, right. I mean, it's not like they were developing the machinery net new. They probably took it from somewhere.
Exactly.
Interesting. Well, so let's say that from a legal point of view, from your role as an expert witness, what is an expert witness? What do you actually fulfill? What role of the chain would you come in, and what are some things for technology leaders like a CIO and CISO to be aware of prior to getting into the point where they need to have an expert witness?
So an expert witness just talks about what did you do, what are the facts, but there's some data that's going to be presented in court, most likely your forensic or investigative report. And then the other side has when I say the other side, either your prosecution or defense. So the opposing side has the right to cross-examine you and to ask questions about how you obtain that data. So most of the time it's just, what procedure did you follow? And they're going to try to pick holes in that to find some key action that you didn't take that may have corrupted the data or have changed the tone of your analysis. See if there was any opinion in there or if it's all fact. And then we just say stick to the facts. But stepping back, how do you get to that point? Well, at some point you have to make a determination was whether or not you're going to be taking this incident into court or not. Or a lot of companies don't. They don't want the publicity of an incident. They don't want the whole investigation process, and they don't want the added cost or burden of preserving all of the evidence in the chain of custody along the way. It does cost more. So they may just do an internal investigation and then make some sort of organizational decision. Okay, we terminate that employee, or now we know what happened, so let's close up the holes and let's invest in this technology to prevent it from happening in the future. Let's retrain our workforce. They're going to take some action there, and they could see a better ROI on it rather than going through the litigation process, which, as you know, takes a long time, costs a lot of money, and may or may not bring about those returns. But in some cases, they say, hey, we might be able to eliminate a competitor or get some sort of a technical restraining order or some other legal action that would allow them to compete more effectively or to get damages for the alleged action that was taken. So you have to start the whole process then on that forensic track, because when you're testifying in court, you're going to talk about how did you obtain that data, how did you protect that data, and how can you verify that what you're saying here in this report is regarding the actual data in question. And that's where if you aren't sure about what you want to do and you start letting other resources play with the data, analyze the data, you corrupt it and make the rest of the whole process, it just doesn't work. You can't take it to the next level on the forensic side because you've already tainted the evidence. So this process has to start immediately upon understanding that there is an incident.
So from someone that is wanting to be out in front of this potential problem happening. Is this normally your focus on sort of the e-discovery side on the email systems and file systems? Is that generally where what we're talking about is the efforts are applied against is email and file systems?
It's kind of almost any repository of data.
Okay.
You have the term there's custodians. There's some person who's responsible for a computer. It's assigned to them. If they are an actor, or if we believe that their machine was involved in the incident, that doesn't mean that they're a suspect or something like that. But that there's evidence on there, then that machine has to be included in the forensic analysis. Images taken of it, and a chain of custody preserved for that data. So you have to identify all these potential custodians, and then preserve the data from those, and then begin the analysis from it.
So that's a huge undertaking, though, because that data could be in a cloud service provider, it could be on corporate file systems, it could be in email, personal email, it could be on corporate email, it could be on Dropbox, it could be on Box. I mean, this data could be anywhere. So how does someone to prepare for this type of a nightmare?
Well, that's a great question, and that's a conversation we have with clients that before adopting these technologies, they have to understand, what is the impact. When you have full control over a system, you can grant access, you can restrict access, when situations like this arise, and you can obtain that information in a forensic manner. When you start outsourcing it and giving it to a cloud provider, now you have a third party in the mix, and it may be more difficult to obtain that data in a correct form. I mean, that provider isn't hosting data just for you. They're hosting it for all these other customers, and they have a duty to protect the data of their other customers, but yet they have a duty to you to, if your contract specifies, that is, to be able to produce it in the format requested. So they have to look at, what are these contractual agreements with the third parties. It doesn't have to necessarily be a cloud vendor. It could just be, their IT service company or an application vendor that would allow them to be able to conduct this type of investigation if it comes up.
So I guess there's two types. There's one's preparing them before they go into kind of the overall, the pre-preparation. And then there's probably a big chunk of your work is helping people after the fact. So after the horses have left the barn, how do we get them all back?
That's correct. I mean, you can say something 1,000 times, but it really hits home when somebody close to an individual or organization suffers an incident, or when it happens to that company. And that's when, we get the call and we help them through it and figuring out what happened and what do they need to do to repair that, and then take a step back and say, now let's look at the overall organization and bring up the iceberg and say, we saw the top of the iceberg, and we may have addressed that part of it, but what's underneath? There's probably a number of other issues, and that's when we need to kind of expand. And after you've addressed that incident, gotten past the crisis, expand and help them improve overall as an organization and their security posture.
So is there a top one or two or three things that are top questions to ask that would lead a CIO or a CISO to get started in this process of, if they know they have to go through, if nothing's happened yet that's bad, but they know that there's a potential nightmare looming, what questions can they ask that would start the impetus moving forward, either with processes, procedures, education and training, or technologies? Like what would be some of the ways you would get started with if someone came to you in this situation?
Well, you start thinking of the incident itself and ask questions about that. So, what would happen if some of our customer data appeared on Google? Or what would happen if Mary Jo there at reception received a phishing message? Would she click on it? Those kinds of questions. Okay, well, I think Mary would. I think a lot of our employees would. And maybe we need to go through some sort of awareness training on that. And then maybe to validate that, you need to do social engineering pen test, or just simply asking questions like, what level of assurance do we have that a reasonably adept hacker would or would not be able to enter our systems? And then if you can't provide that level of assurance, then you'd have to go through a process to validate it. Maybe that is a pen test. Maybe it's some sort of a review of application architectures and starting discussions on that. Are you taking risk-based approach to the way you make business decisions? And that doesn't just include information technology adoption, but just the way your company operates. And so start to have risk discussions with your peers and with those above you, that can start these conversations going.
So from the security education, training, and awareness, those suggestions you just had, I think were great. What about if you are you're looking at email systems, you're looking at putting your email in the cloud or have it in the cloud right now, and you have choices of Office 365 or putting it on premise or some other vendor. What e-discovery questions / legal hold questions would be important to ask? And the reason I'm asking this is because there are more layers of services you can add to your own basic email systems that add a certain degree of sophistication to e-discovery. What are some of the necessary add-ons that you would see need to have as far as whether you're on-premise or off-premise?
So you would first need to understand what kind of litigation or e-discovery burden does legal anticipate. It's a good idea to understand that, because that's what's going to allow you to determine really what your risk is in moving to the cloud. If there's low anticipation of anything like that, then you can make the decision to go with the technology that offers fewer services, and that's a legitimate, informed decision. However, if you do anticipate a lot of it, then you need to take some reasonable action to have those third-party services in place to give you litigation holds or the ability to forensically acquire that data, or to do quick exports, or to be able to do key term searching across the board, or other things like that.
So some examples would be like key term searching, legal holds, litigation holds, forensics capabilities. So those would be the third-party type services that you'd want if your legal department deemed there to be sufficient risk, is to add those examples. Am I missing any in that list, or is that pretty comprehensive?
Those are the ones that come to mind. Don't know if I can use the term comprehensive.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Are you of an opinion that hybrid clouds is what you're seeing people move to most now, from where people are moving their systems to? Is it's more of a hybrid cloud situations, or are people fully, in your opinion, moving to full cloud deployments?
But I think hybrid cloud is really a great area, because many of the adopters of cloud technologies went with either a public cloud or a private cloud, and in some cases that fully met their requirements. And that's great. They're going to stick with their public or private cloud. But in many cases, there had to be some compromise. Maybe it was on the level of control that they really wanted, but they couldn't have, or maybe it was on the flexibility and the expandability that they desired, but security or other concerns were more important. And so they had to go with one or the other. Well, what this allows those companies to do is to now implement a solution that can kind of integrate a little bit of both and give them that more comprehensive solution that they were looking for in the beginning. Now, for other companies who said, oh, look, public cloud doesn't fit it, private cloud doesn't fit it, I'm not going to compromise, so I'm going to stick with what I have. Now, I'm not saying that there weren't costs associated with that. They lost out on some of the benefits of the whole cloud architecture with that. But for those companies, now they can say, hey, I can step out and I can start utilizing the cloud and have all of my objectives met.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I mean, I think it's certainly for some companies, full cloud deployment makes sense, but really looking at the risk and diving into the risk elements almost necessitates bringing many business departments in, or at least a couple of the key ones, risk and legal and finance and such, and really understanding the customer mix and the data types is really, really important, because there's several people that CIOs that I'm working with that made early pushes into the cloud. I think from the marketing point of view, they just kind of got sucked into this. Makes a good sense from a marketing point of view, and the business went along with it. But now their data is in unstructured file types, and they can't actually run tools against it to determine what types of data are out there. They have to go interview business department leaders who really don't understand their data to begin with anyway, and they can't even run any tools against it to kind of see what the mix of data from a compliance and a privacy point of view, because it's out there.
Right. In some cases, they became less flexible in moving to the cloud. They moved to the cloud and kind of got locked in with a provider, because there may not have been a method for either integrating that data with other cloud services, or in exporting that data to a cloud service that may not have been available at the time they moved it out, but now is a better fit or offers additional services that they require.
This is not funny at all, but I find it ironic. I run 2 virtual CIO mastermind groups yesterday. We do them virtually, and there was about 10 guys and ladies on the phone between these 2 meetings. And one of the topics for one of the meetings, one of the subtopics was finding qualified talent. And all the finding of the qualified talent was skills of the cloud platforms that they'd moved on to. And I thought to myself, well, I thought that one of the values with going to the cloud is leveraging their talent, but they need really specialized labor to take that to understand their business processes and to be able to integrate with the cloud vendor. So it's interesting how some of the benefits of the cloud, we're finding new challenges with it as well.
Right. It's just the expertise level changes. Instead of supporting some of the underlying infrastructure, now you're doing more of the application and user integration or data manipulation side of things. And you're able to leverage it more. I mean, in many cases, that means good news for them because they're probably using the application in new and more innovative ways than they were before.
Well, definitely. And I think that's part of the shift here and what we're going to be uncovering over the next couple years. And I was thinking as we wrap up, Eric, one of the parts that you and I had talked about initially prior to the interview was artificial intelligence, and I'm going to throw in the word machine learning, but I'd be interested in your perspective of how AI is going to emerge and its impact within your space and within what you're thinking about AI as it relates to kind of the picture with IT security and higher level business IT leadership.
Well, so AI, of course, we don't have true AI in the official form of the word, a computer that thinks like a human and has all those, the understanding of itself and can, spur on its own questions and actions independent of any sort of input. But what we have are systems that are increasingly more human, and they're able to think in more complex ways. And as I think, they don't really think, but they process a more complex series of commands and are able to take additional actions based on that. You speak of machine learning. You train a machine based on some data set to be able to evaluate, make decisions, or produce results from that data set, or produce new data. And then you start giving it additional data, and usually there's a retraining process along the way, continually refining that computer-based model. And now you can fill in all the gaps in the knowledge, collect all kinds of data. Especially big companies like Google and any of the search engines are collecting a lot of data. And what they really want to do is they're going to use that to gather even more data, fill in more of the gaps, and then ultimately you got to make some decisions based on the data. How are we going to target ads, or how are we going to offer services, or what's important to our customers. But that's all the pros of artificial intelligence. But we also get the negatives. Every time there's a technology out there, there's people who are using it for positive uses, people are using it for negative uses. So you get the bots, the botnets out there. What are they? They're more intelligent malware. Malware that it doesn't act on its own, acts in conjunction with other malware from a command and control server. We have the phishing that's just spun out by automated programs or text messages or those wonderful robocalls, kind of hacker-based expert systems, all kinds of artificial intelligence that is making our lives more difficult. I feel in some ways, it's like the Cold War of technology. We develop something new, it makes us more productive, and then it's used for some ill purpose, and we have to develop some more technology to help us overcome the negative implications of our technology.
Yeah, and I would say that partially what would be interesting to see is how machine learning and as AI continues to morph, is how almost like we're fighting infections in the human body. The body mobilizes, and it's intelligent enough in a healthy body, for the most part, will mobilize and deploy troops to go handle a problem in the human body. And my thinking is that eventually that's what's going to happen with IoT and with increased complexity. We're going to need the systems to be aware of infections and deploy automatically, and less be resultant in whether or not someone's deployed antivirus correctly. Which, by the way, I'm finding that people deploy antivirus. Most of the interviews we do these days, we're finding that it's not even people are having a hard time even deploying antivirus correctly. So we have to move out of that into maybe machines being so self-aware that they can protect themselves.
Yeah, we stepped back a little bit and talked about all the cloud services, but the technology is so easy for others to implement. It's no longer just contained within IT. Any person within an organization can suddenly start adopting a cloud technology, can sign up for a service, and now your computer is connected in with a third-party provider, or your data is floating around. So it behooves the business owner or leaders to establish appropriate methods for how these services are going to be adopted and evaluated and used. In the same way as we start using IoT, we bring all these things in-house. You could use IoT and not implement any security controls on it if you wanted to, and if you're simply using it for more data collection, that's going to benefit you in the short term.
Right. Well, it's interesting. And I know you had a slide share that had 38,000 views. I know you have a huge amount of slides on SlideShare, which most people know is owned by LinkedIn. So I was taking a look, and you have one that has 38,000 views. Did you know that?
Wow, no, I didn't know it was that high. Is that the one from the ISACA presentation, I think?
I'm not. I think. Well, it definitely was called "Detecting Intrusions and Malware." That was the name of it. I'm not sure if that one was given at ISACA or not.
That might have been from one of the security summits.
But do you find that people are asking you that question a lot these days? Is what your thoughts and opinions are about detecting malware and intrusions?
Well, yeah, we're still fighting some of the same battles. It's still problems with phishing, and still problems with passwords, and still problems with malware. And in some ways, people have gotten a bit numb to it. Like, okay, there's malware. We've had antivirus for decades now. Even floppy disks had to be scanned for viruses. But the idea of malware, I think, is just so common to the average user. They just kind of expect that it's either they're going to be protected, or if they're not protected, that it's just going to happen. And we need to raise that level of awareness that these are very valuable tools for the attackers. They're used out there, and that they need to make sure that they're both acting in a way that helps prevent the malware from infecting the machine, and that they're using the correct tools to monitor the machine and reduce the infections and spread.
Well, I'm going to provide a link in our show notes for our conversation today, Eric, and plus the link to your slides, because I found them very, very interesting. And this one in particular, I'll link up to in the show notes so that people have resources. But I've appreciated our conversation. We've covered everything from augmented virtual reality to e-discovery and cloud security, all the way to artificial intelligence. Is there any way you would suggest people, if they wanted to reach out to you or learn more, what would be the best way for people to reach out to you?
So, it just depends on what they're looking for. Looking for consulting services, contact us at JurInnov. That's www.jurinnov.com. If you just want information on how you can be more secure, follow me on Twitter, or read some of those slides in SlideShare. Just look at my social media.
Yeah, you're quite active on social media, and I will link up for people to be able to connect with you either on Twitter. We'll have links for them to directly email you via LinkedIn or JurInnov. So I appreciate you for your time and for your contribution to information security and your thought leadership, Eric.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thanks.
Okay, have a great day.
You too.
Thanks for listening in to this week's episode. Join me next week when I interview Michelle Guillen, author of the book, Broadcasting Happiness. Until then, this is Bill Murphy wishing you a great week. So there you have it. This wraps another episode of Bill Murphy's Red Zone podcast. To get all the relevant show notes, please go to our blog at www.redzonetech.net/podcast. Additionally, make sure you go to iTunes and leave your comments in iTunes about the show. This helps our show rankings enormously, and it helps support the show. Until next time, I appreciate you very much for listening. Thank you.